Believe it or not, it's been 5 years since Huawei launched this pair of absolutely legendary smartphones, and also 5 years since its ban in the US. We need to talk about potentially the biggest loss in the smartphone world, and how it not only affected the progress half a decade ago, but how we're still feeling the effects of it today. Hey guys, I'm Ryan Thomas, and this is one divisive topic. On one hand, you have the Huawei fans like myself, who absolutely adored the innovation, the development, the straight up quality of some of the best phones to have ever released, and then you have the detractors who see Huawei as the same threat that the US did, and will completely overlook the great phones regardless. I'm not saying there's a right or wrong way to look at it. I think both sides are very valid, and it's clear the ban wasn't necessarily focused on Huawei smartphones, but more the network infrastructure hardware that the company had been widely known for in places like data centers, comms cabinets, etc. across the US and Europe, which was problematic to say the least due to the alleged tie to the Chinese government. It's definitely worth reading into if you have a spare few hours, but that's not what we're going to be focusing on today. The byproduct of this ban meant that Huawei phones could no longer run Google Play services, and as a result, the devices that came after the ban were practically e-waste in the eyes of many people. Sure, you could use them with Huawei's app gallery or sideload APKs. In fact, there were even ways to get Google Play services running on a lot of these phones, and I personally did that with the Huawei Mate 30 Pro back in the day. But all of those workarounds were sort of reserved for us enthusiasts, which is only a small percentage of the total amount of people who buy smartphones. Huawei had worked hard to make itself a household name, and by the time the final Huawei phone with the Google Play services rolled up, I knew quite a few people in the UK that weren't techie but still rocked a Huawei phone, rocked a P20 Pro or a P30 Pro. Now, I know people who still to this day use a Huawei P30 Pro who haven't upgraded from the phone that came out half a decade ago. These are largely sought after devices, and it's no real surprise that many were upset when the ban came about. The common feeling is that competition breeds innovation, and it's fair to say that Huawei really was nipping on the heels of Samsung and Apple when it came to hardware. I would argue that we only got that mega progress between 2015 and 2020, the golden era of smartphones to many people including myself, because of the emergence and the rise of Huawei devices. The P20 Pro really took off. Maybe it was due to the brightly and uniquely coloured rear finish that definitely caught the eyes of many, or maybe it was because of the fantastic cameras with unique software tools to go with. I know several people who bought one of these things who were on Samsung up until this point, and they all said very similar things. It was a familiar feeling to older Galaxy devices, but with a drastic upgrade in battery life and cameras. That phone really caught people's attention, even consumers here in the West and in the UK in particular. The Mate 20 Pro was more aimed at techie people and enthusiasts with its more impressive hardware. I adored this phone back in the day, and it felt like the Galaxy Note competitor, minus maybe the stylus obviously. I think this is the phone that many of us Android fans really did fall in love with, or at least as much as you can fall in love with a smartphone. The P30 Pro was a banger, there is no doubt about that. It didn't invent the periscope telephoto camera, but it certainly helped popularise it, and we still have one of those in our smartphones in 2024. In fact, Apple and now Google have put them into their smaller Pro models, which is fantastic to see, because prior to this, you kind of had to go for the bigger phone to get the 5x zoom. The P30 Pro also came in some fantastic colours, had the water droplet notch when many phones rocked those wide things, and also presented great battery life and some pretty rapid charging for the time too. Its camera was one of the best, if not the best, that you could actually buy, thanks to the ginormous RYYB Debye main sensor that could essentially see in the dark back in a time where many smartphones had tiny little sensors that really struggled in low light. The P30 Pro was probably the most interesting and most popular Huawei phone that still ran the Google Play services, and I think that people who still use these on a daily basis, I kind of get it. The Mate 30 Pro sort of followed on from that with the same big main camera sensor, a huge ultra-wide sensor, but made do without that periscope zoom camera. It had the wraparound display and a unique volume adjustment where you actually slid your thumb along the screen instead of pressing a button. There were no volume buttons on the device. And it also had the more secure Face ID sort of style authentication like Apple was doing back then. But because it lacked the Google Play services out the box, not many, including myself, recommended it, and very few people bought one of these, or at least didn't return it once they'd found out that there was no Play services on it. Unfortunately, despite the P30 Pro and Mate 30 Pro sharing a generation and releasing about 6 months apart, the numbers, the reviews, the sentiment, the popularity and the feeling around them just couldn't be more different. And all because of that GMS omission, brought on as a byproduct of the Huawei ban. Think about it, since these phones came out 5 years ago, has there really been major hardware progress? Really? Like, is your life meaningfully better off with a 2024 phone versus a 2019 phone in terms of hardware? And I really do mean hardware. Unfortunately, these older Huawei phones are long out of date and out of support. Whereas you pick up a Galaxy S, Pixel or iPhone from the last year or so, and it's going to be receiving updates long into the end of this decade, probably going into the next one. Combine that with all of the software trickery and AI stuff that, man, these firms have really been piling on us recently, and you end up with more complete packages than we had back in the day with these Huawei phones. Google has released practically the same Pixel 8 Pro hardware in the shiny new flat-sided Pixel 9 Pro. The Galaxy S24 Ultra's camera setup is in some ways backwards and worse than its predecessor, and Apple continues to release iterative upgrades, now with a totally useless and somewhat inconvenient additional camera button. Where are the cutting-edge hardware improvements, guys? Flat sides, brighter screens? Really? There have been some great innovators that have fallen in recent years. LG springs to mind with its wonderful and quirky devices that brought genuinely useful features but were clearly too wacky for the general public. BlackBerry too, with its terrific hardware keyboards that people to this day still hold dear, with companies like Click's keyboard trying to bring that feature back. But I don't think any really held the big dogs accountable like Huawei did with its constantly forward-thinking hardware that really did push Samsung and Apple to do better. Since they fell, there's been a distinct fall-off in hardware innovation, and that's a real shame. Maybe one day a company will take its place and create truly cutting-edge hardware, and I sure hope that happens. What do you think of Prime Huawei, guys? For a long time, the Mate 20 Pro was my favorite phone of all time, but S7 Edge, yeah, that's a difficult one. The device that really did wonderful things, the P30 Pro, will go down as an absolute legend of the space, regardless of your personal thoughts on it. And the Mate 30 Pro was a wonderful piece of hardware, it just couldn't be recommended due to the lackluster software. And actually, the company has struggled ever since. I don't think there's a single Huawei phone post Mate 40 Pro that I can really say is noteworthy. If you still rock one of these bad boys, then let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your stories as a big Huawei fan. I'm super interested to see how many of you still rock maybe a P30 Pro as your daily driver still. And while you're down there in the comments, be sure to hit like if you enjoyed today's content, and of course, subscribe to never miss another upload. I've been Ryan Thomas, and I'll catch you later. Cheers.